still do it, hey.
Fantastic. Welcome to Whooverville.
Isn't it wonderful? We're all together again.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely amazing that this can happen.
Yeah, the presence of people.
Yes.
Superb. And
interacting, intermingling.
Indeed. And I mean, are you your son's in Midlands or West Midlands?
I am. I'm a Brummie.
Yeah.
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 My mum was a Scot, but
yes.
so that's sort of, I suppose, even things out. But when I went to drama school, you had to kind of lose your accent anyway.
Yeah.
It was the done thing.
That was the way. Well, of course, that's not really the case now, is it? But I can imagine.
Not at all.
Yeah. So, I mean, that makes it seem like you were bitten by the sort of the board trading bug at an early age. Then.
Yes, I was 10, and it was Parents' Day. I think it happens for a lot of actors. I felt I just felt the audience for the first time. It was a John Keats poem called Mesmerides, and I sat in front of my class and they chanted the poem, and I got to enact the character, and I felt the audience, and I could make them laugh, and I could stop them laughing. And I was an only child, so this was absolute alchemy. It was just extraordinary. So kind of put that in my pocket. And then at secondary school, I was in the Amgrams, and the WI asked me, they needed a young person in the play. So they asked me if I'd go and be in their play for the festival. And I did. So then I started to wonder if I could really do it, and I took Lambda external exams. There was a drama school called Lambda, and I lived by then in a place called Tamworth, which was, I don't know, it's near Atherstone. And, so I used to go on Saturday mornings to a teacher and did these external exams just to see if I could do it or not, and then went off to drama school, a place called East 15, which was very method. Also because the lady that was teaching me said she didn't think that RADA would ever want to know about me, so she thought East 15 was a better idea, that they had stranger people, and
so, I mean,
I might fit in.
East 15 is quite an established, highly reputable school, isn't it?
It probably is now, yes. I mean, it's method, so it came out of Joan Littlewood and Stratford East, and you know that whole East End thing, and the resurgence of stuff there. So it was one of the actresses from that, Maggie Berry, who started the drama school. And when I went for my interview, Alison Steadman was in her final year, so she was doing a play where she was blind, and I remember her walking around. They had a barn there which was donated by Harry H. Corbett, and she was sort of rehearsing and pretending she couldn't see and feeling her way around this barn as I auditioned, and I just loved it so much. You audition for a whole day then, and did all sorts of things, and I just loved it so much I didn't go. I had other interviews set up, and I just said, no, if I get in, this is where I want to be.
So did you have a chance to do much improv at school? You say you got bitten by the bug sort of age 10. Was there much of it, that's quite an ambitious thing to do at that age, isn't it? To improvise.
Yeah, no, that didn't happen, and that was later. But I think, this was the 60s, so all of that was in the air. And we had a very progressive drama teacher. So I realised, because I stayed friends with her, that she was in actual fact only a few years older than me. She was 6 years older, so very contemporary. So certainly at secondary school, yes, we improvised then, but not at 10. Well, unless I got it wrong. And then you'd have to make it up and have a hope for the best. Yes.
Now, am I right thinking that you then went on to the RSC?
Yes, which was an odd. Well, I went with the Actors Company first. They were just, Ian McKellen was just, had just had the idea of starting the Actors Company at Whooverville. And they invited like-minded actors. Carol Blakehurst and Sheila Reid was in the company. And first time in a very established company, they chose the plays, they chose the directors, and they handed the parts out. They chose who would play what. And Felicity Kendall was in the company as well, and it was intimated to me that she was very pregnant, that I would take over from her as the maid in the Fado farce opposite Ian, but she was just having too much fun and she never gave up. So I never got to go on as the maid, and I had to play the hotel tart, who was in a black corset and peignoir, and to this day, people that knew me then call me Boobs. I don't know why. But yeah, I've still got a girlfriend who, from that time we were acting ASMs together, and we went on this very smart cruise in Egypt, going down the Nile. She's coming, come on, boo-boo, come on, Boobs. And I go, oh, dear God, no. Come on, Boobs. We're like a comedy act anyway. She's very tall and got long legs, and I'm toddling on behind.
Excellent. That sounds like a really diverse group of performers in that company.
Oh, it was. Matt Long was there, John Tordoff. I think I've mentioned Cara, haven't I?
Yeah.
Cara Blakeston. Yes, huge group. Robert Edison, who was was older then and played Friar Lawrence and had been Hamlet, and so yes, it was a big stretch like this.
Superb.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I'm getting the vibe that theatre's sort of, where your heart is that right?
I think it is. But, well, I don't know about young actors now, but certainly it has been. It's the thing.
Yes.
You know why you're doing it. You've got an audience. You know if you're failing or succeeding. The contact's immediate. They feed into you.
So it's that immediate symbiosis, isn't it?
Yeah.
With the audience. You mentioned earlier on having the power in your hand.
Yes.
Intoxicating.
It is.
On the subject of theatre work, I know that you played Sadie in Little Voice, which was a stage show to start with, which I didn't unfortunately get the chance to see. It was superb to see, on the big screen. Did it translate well, do you think, having been in that?
I preferred the play.
Yeah.
Jim's writing, Jim Cartwright, it's seeming reality, but it's poetry. It's just wonderful stuff. And with the play, we sort of investigated more. It took a long time to get from the play to the film. Right. There were several versions before we actually, a number of years later, something like 7 years later, actually did the film, and only Jane and myself sort of transferred from one medium to the other.
Yeah.
And the play was more female orientated, new characters were brought in for the film,
right,
that had more male emphasis in them.
Yeah.
And I just thought the storytelling in the play, and again because it was theatre, and you took the audience on a huge journey, and you knew they were on their feet every night. You knew you'd achieved something.
Yeah.
You'd made them laugh a lot. You'd made them feel a great deal.
Yeah.
And I know for my own character, Sadie May had about 12 OKs and a couple of sentences. And when you started the play, the audience would be laughing at me, and by the end they were laughing with me. And that's a huge journey, and Jim had just crafted that beautifully. And I just loved the play. Just thought it was a great ride for us and the audience.
I remember when I was just simply watching the film, there was a real vibe. I mean, not just a feel-good movie, but there's an energy to it. And I can only imagine what that must have been like, to be in the flesh and doing it on the stage. And seeing it on the film, thinking, has this been done? But, I mean, Jane did.
Oh no, Jane did it all.
Yeah.
She's amazing, Miss Oryx. Calls me Netsky. Oh, Netsky. Oh. And my partner's Mr. Selfish, because we went to a party once and she wanted the chair that was next to him. He said, oh no, it's for Annette. Said, oh, Mr. Selfish. All right. Yeah, she's great. I love Jane.
One film it's a bit obscure, this one, but I again it picked up a bit of a vibe. It's a film called Last Day of Summer. And I'm sure I remember seeing it on TV, but there's a real warmth to that. If you've not seen it, I heartily recommend it. It's a beautiful there's a twist. I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but it's a beautiful tale, and that looked wonderful. Where was that?
That was, it's an Ian McEwan story, and it's from his First Love, Last Rites. It's from a very slim volume of short stories, but he adapted it to the screen as well. And it was Lou Grade's old house that the house. Yeah, and it's a young boy who's orphaned, and he's got to live with his elder brother, who's a hippie, and fills the house, makes the house into a commune. And then this young lad isn't very happy, so the brother engages me. And to begin with, the boy doesn't want to be in the same room because he thinks he'll get fat because he's with this fat person he doesn't like. And then they have this glorious summer together. And then there is a twist at the end, you're absolutely right. And a wonderful cinematographer, Nick Nolan, shot it, and then he went on to work with Spielberg. But Derek Bannum, who directed it, was terrific. And Saskia Reeves is in it. And it's a beautiful unfolding of a relationship, and it's very intricate. And it was film on 4. It was shot for when they used to make their own films. So it was shot for film on 4, and then it had a short release, but nothing very much. Yeah. But it is one of those that I held in the part. You know, there's often for actors only a few things that you really, really treasure, and that's one of them.
Yeah, that shines through. I mean, the aesthetic of it. Some of you might be, I might be showing my age here. There's an advert for a chocolate bar called Flake, and it was very of its time, with a girl in a hayfield, and everything was gold, and it had a real sort of a period edge to it, and the whole film was shot in that fashion, with these golden sunsets and this lazy sort of languid afternoons. It was really, you know, gorgeous. Yeah. And
it was the first time I'd worked with a Steadicam, and I thought that was the sexiest. Mind you, Nick Nolan was not unattractive, but he was in. It was like dancing or making love. It's just the most wonderful thing. And of course, I'd only worked with static cameras, so you know, you're set up and that's it. But to have someone who is just moving with you, and absolutely glorious stuff.
Fantastic.
But with a nasty twist at the end.
Yeah, that's not no spoilers. I meant it. Yeah, it came out of the blue, did that. For me, when I was watching it, I had a feeling that there was something, you know, that was being built
because there's always a tension underneath.
Yeah, that's right, and you could feel the way it had been put together, you know. But yeah, very much so. Yeah, last day of summer.
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, Archers. I mean, this long-standing.
Yes, and Hazelwoody.
Hazelwoody.
Horrible Hazel. Yes.
Nice character.
She has. Whenever I play villains, I try and find why they might be as they are, and I seem to play quite a few villains. And she was adopted, and I think she's never had that's something in her that she's never felt comfortable or right, doesn't know who her parents are, and so that's for me where I find the trigger for her absolutely appalling behaviour. I love working with June. She's just tremendous, my goodness me. Yeah, I'm going to, this is a spoiler I suppose, but they have been in touch to see if I can go back and do some more Hazel. She hasn't been around for a couple of years.
No, absolutely, but they do have a habit, don't they, in the Archers, of sort of letting a character rest for a storyline to come in, and then a bit of a resurgence. So
she'll be there in her Armani suit, high heels, that's how I see her.
Excellent.
It's a break for myself.
But so on the theme of characters and the Queen of Mean, I think I heard you refer to yourself as at some point. That brings me on to, I suppose, the character that apart from one, of course, that's most identifiable as being the sort of villainess, which is Babe Smith in EastEnders.
Another sad case. Another sad, lonely woman who'd never been loved. Yeah. What can I say? When I'd worked with Dominic Treadwell Collins on a one-off for Sky. They were doing these Christmas crackers, they were called. And I'd done one with Stephen Fry, and then it was Sheridan Smith's.
Yeah.
They were inviting comedians to write stories and act in them. And I did Sheridan's, and it was Dominic, and then he said, I'll always look for an Annette Badland shaped part. And then he got EastEnders, and he said, would you come and do it? And I went, oh, I don't know. And he said, oh, come on, we'll have a good time, and maybe she's a pearly queen. And I came away from that meeting, and I had a little book, and I'd written in capital letters, good. So she was going to be a good character.
Right.
And I don't know what went wrong. All I can imagine is there was a scene with Tim West, and he was sitting on a sofa watching the telly, and I just took the remote control and turned the telly off and told him what I thought about him, because I'd always been in love with him, and he spurned me. And at the end, I just put the telly back on and walked out of the room, and I think the writers went, oh, she can do nasty. Because I never became a pearly queen, I never had any fun like that. And I think it sort of grew, because they respond very much to what you give them on EastEnders. You know, the writers respond, what we do, very involved, and do respond to what actors portray.
I suppose with the rapid turnaround of the show as well, there's a far greater ability to do that, isn't there? That
yes.
You see you do something one week and think, we're onto something here, let's start manipulating the character a bit.
Yeah.
Because I think it's fascinating that Bay went in as not necessarily being, you know, just being an addition to the family rather than the really powerfully, I mean, emotive for want of a better word. I mean, it was a bit like the JR situation. You know, you're watching Babe and thinking, I hate her. Yes. It was powerful. Those confrontations, particularly when you left the Queen Vic.
Yeah, when they chucked me out in the rain.
Yeah.
Danny was so powerful, he actually threw me on the floor, and they went, it's all right, it's fine, I'll be fine.
keep going, till we come.
Yes. Yeah, that was, I mean, they put the hoses on like video that night, I remember it was very cold, I remember all that. Gosh.
Yes, it was early in the year, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Gosh. So, is there a likelihood, I'm now fishing, because I think on Twitter there was somebody asked you this, and you very cryptically said, "I'll be careful what you wish for."
Yes. Well, wouldn't you think if you were playing Babe? I don't know. There's no plan at the moment, as far as I'm aware. I have been asked by the writers and the directors if I would consider it, but I don't think there's anything immediate.
Nothing formal in the pipeline.
No.
So, of course, the character was not written out, just disappeared from view.
Yes. And I don't think I think she's quite tenacious.
Yeah,
so
I think so.
Somewhere.
Waiting for the
I hope the three-wheeler's broken down, because it used to break down all the time anyway. I hope she doesn't return in the three-wheeler. There was one shot when we burned the caravan and everything, and Louise Bradshaw and I were in my car in the three-wheeler, and there was Danny in his Range Rover sitting on the other side. And they would light the stuff for to ignite the caravan, and I had the motor running, but I go up and it just go.
Oh, no.
And we tried this about 4 times, and I ended up, I was Babe on a rope. They got the boys, the prop boys had a rope attached to the front bumper, and we were on a hill, and so they ignited it, the lads heave-hoed, I steered it down this hill, then Danny set off in his car, little devil, tyre on the rope, because the rope had gone through the back of the car now. So then we were like this all over the place, so Babe on a rope.
So you were keel ball.
Yes, yeah, God bless them.
Absolutely.
And it was the fuel, there was always something wrong with it.
Yes.
Fuel pipe had decided it couldn't cope. My dad actually worked for Reliance and said, "You're never having one of those fire traps. You're not having that." Yes.
And I suppose taking up the character of Babe meant that, and in true villain and villainess styles, that you can't go anywhere, can you? Because in theatre, it's sort of the green umbrella, isn't it? People don't tend to recognise it. You've beamed into people's homes 5 days a week.
It's the only thing I've done where they didn't people don't come up and go, I can't remember your name, but I like what you do, or you're a Slovene, aren't you? Or it's Annette, isn't it? They go, babe, you're all right, babe. How you doing, babe? You okay? And you go, oh. And it was usually a tube carriage full of 14-year-old lads or something. You go, oh. Some people adopt the headphone thing, but I don't think it really stops them.
No,
they still want to make that contact, and you are the character for them, and you're absolutely right, you are in their homes every night, so that's who they know, and they expect you to be that person. I got death threats towards the end, because they made me really villainous before they chucked me out, and yeah, the police were involved in that, so that was scary, yes. That was really...
So I was going to say, there is a thing, isn't there, where viewers or people sometimes sort of find it hard to make that distinction between the character and the you know.
And you can joke about it. You can go, well, it's somebody in dirty underpants in a single room in Liverpool. You know, well, I had to diminish it for myself, so I wasn't afraid of it. Because they were saying, don't go out, always have your phone with you, don't tell people where you're going. But you don't know they're not getting on a train with a machete. You don't. No. So I had to make nonsense of it, so it didn't sort of consume me for a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, gosh. I didn't realise it had,
yeah, that's how bad she was.
So, going on to the Doctor Who serials, presumably if you were recognised for that, people didn't ask you to unzip.
Oh, they do.
Did they?
I've terrified little boys in supermarkets. It was one Christmas, I wasn't feeling very well, I went to the supermarket, and this family they pass you to begin with, you see the glint in the eye, and, you know, it's two small lads and mom, and then they eventually pinion me to the frozen pea section. And I was nice for a bit, and then I got a bit tired of it, and I just went... The little lads, and away they went. Because it was really Mom who was kind of, you know, we can follow her. Yeah. So don't cross me when I've got a cold, I'm lethal.
And how did the Doctor Who happen? You worked with, because you were saying you worked with Dominic Treadwell-Collins to get into EastEnders. Was it a similar sort of...
I'd worked with Phil Collinson, the producer. Russell has encyclopedic knowledge of actors, because he writes with the telly-on, so he can tell you things that you've completely forgotten about in your life. And initially it was just the first 2 episodes. There was no Boomtown, so I was part of the trio, and they were the first episodes that were ever shot in the regeneration, because they always they never do the first episode first of the big series, because they want to know, you know, they want the wheels oiled and they want to know how long things will take. So we did those 2 eps first up, and Russell liked what I was doing, and he wrote Boomtown, which arrived around Christmas, and it was one of the biggest gifts I've ever been given, I think.
Super.
You know, just wonderful to have lines like "dinner and bondage works for me." And the loneliness and the pain of it. You know, she ran the gamut. You know, it was just, and she was the first character to confront the Doctor, to actually question. You know, the restaurant scenes. She's questioning what he's about, and and his morals. So that was just glorious.
I mean, very much so, because often with Doctor Who you get villains that don't have much of a journey as such. I wouldn't say they're 1 or 2 dimensional, but they've got very distinct sort of aims, and not much is explored beyond that. Whereas with Blonde, in the first 2 episodes, I mean, there's this glorious bits of glee where you're going and the emergency telephone is actually read, and beautiful bits like that. And then in Boomtown, of course, some time has moved on, and your character has perceptibly changed. The melancholy is there, and the regret, and it's a very much a, you can tell that there's a journey.
Yes, and simple things that they did, they were great with, you know, the toilet scene when she's sitting all alone in the loo and she's hearing about the pregnancy. And I never wore the suit. I mean, it was all, you know, it was 6 foot. Well, there were men in suits.
Oh, right, okay.
And they take the head off, and there were these two desperate eyes and a sweaty forehead. And you try and get a cigarette and a glass of water into them, and they'd have to put them back on and leave. But we worked together. They didn't just, you know, in some productions they would have just put the physical entity there, and then I'd have dubbed it in ADR.
Yeah.
But they didn't. They got me in there so that they understood what I'd be trying to do with it and respond to that. So there was a lot of care taken with the emotional journey. And she's very grateful to the doctor by the end, which is a little ends up as an egg with a little rasta hairdo. And she actually says thank you.
Yeah.
She thanks me.
Yeah. Of course, I mean, saying that those episodes, when they aired, they weren't the first ones, but it was out of sequence. Of course, it hadn't been aired by that point, so you've no idea how it was going to be received.
No, nobody did. We did the read through. They didn't know if the fans would take to it, but I think it's successful because they were all huge fans of it.
Yeah.
They cared about it. So it wasn't a cynical venture to go, oh, let's see if we can regenerate this. This is a good thing. We'll take this and see if we can massage it back to life. They all really cared about it and loved it, and I think that shows. But we did our first read-through at Cardiff Stadium, not in the actual playing area, but in one of these huge rooms. And it was quite gladiatorial because they had one long row of tables on one side, a row here that the actors were on the other side were producers. You know, there was Wales, there was America, there was England. At the ends, we had heads of departments, and then beyond them, there were people sitting, you know, in rows of chairs. And I felt very much for Chris and Billy, because you felt when you read a line, they were going to hold cards up going 2, 1, 10, 4. So it was an enormous event.
Yeah.
And they all, when I was telling someone earlier, when we began, we had an acting block, and then they'd have a week to prep the next lot. But by the time I got back for Boomtown, that had all gone, because it was they just had to work so hard to achieve, you know, all the prosthetics and put everything together. So but they had no idea. None at all.
Particularly on the back of the fact that the series had a quite a turbulent sort of few years prior to that, with obviously with being taken off the air, and then the start in the mid 90s with the TV film that then, you know, didn't really gain momentum. So I can imagine it was, you know, it was a bit of an edge situation.
Yes.
But did it feel like there was a spark there? You say that everybody loved it.
Yeah, and Chris loved it, you see, too. So there was a lot of work in those initial eps. To, as you say, that energy to try and bring it to life and find it. Without laying something on top of it. It came out of the writing again, and the you know, that energy and the situation. So, but you know, I hadn't talked to Chris about it, but the onus on him to, you know, make it right must have been enormous.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's well documented from classic series doctors, if you like, that there was almost a proprietorial sort of responsibility.
Yes.
John Pertwee, for example, regarded it as his family, and Tom Baker and so on. And so there was definitely
if you're playing the doctor, you have to be responsible, don't you? If you're playing the doctor, you can't go, oh well, I'll go over here and do my bit and then get on with it.
No, absolutely.
I think you have to embrace all of it, and you have to be responsible for all of it. The doctor. Yeah. There's no sidestepping that.
It's all sort of very much so. Yeah.
Well, what's on the list next? Oh, you're having to think.
I'm aware of it. So, in terms of working with Chris, because you've worked on Big Finish now with him, haven't you?